Her name was Ariana, and her fate was more than just tragic. She was literally buried in misfortune, which forced her to accept the fact that she was an abandoned princess. Ariana's feet walked along the expensive tiles of her gigantic, gloomy castle. She wanted only one thing: to get out of here at any cost. She was waiting for the very thing that would save her, pull her out of this darkness, bring a ray of sunshine into her life, when she would be able to burn her eyes with light again. And suddenly it happened. Someone unknown extended his hand to her. The darkness almost completely dissipated. Hands touched, darkness and light, like the moon and sun creating an incredible eclipse. Such meetings happen as rarely as rings of fire in the sky. And finally, when she is able to meet the one who will rescue her from the abyss, she will leave with gratitude in her heart. It was a beautiful man, Joseph, who with great ardor and passion grabbed her hand and raised it to his heart. Everything around was shining, but just before this guy arrived, everything was bad, as she had said earlier. 5 years ago, our heroine came under suspicion of a very serious crime in the kingdom. So much so that the king himself came to the meeting. Every single person in the audience blamed her. Everyone cursed her dozens of times and wished her the worst. But all this noise did not bother Ariana then. She answered them with a smile on her face that all this was nonsense, and nonsense that was not worth a dime. There were many, many important personalities present at this meeting, and there was not a single one who could stand up for the heroine. The emperor asked again and again, but the answer was the same, which of course did not please the people behind. As it turns out, she is accused of attempting to assassinate her brother and pretender to the throne, Charles. She did not admit her guilt, and besides, she understood that the emperor understood that she had nothing to do with it. She remained just as calm and composed, and there was no sign of worry in her eyes, as she did not consider herself guilty at all. Here is our Charles, who was a close contender for the throne and would have almost caught up with Ariana. They couldn't get along. At one point, he became too aggressive. Dishes flew in all directions, and crystal saucers broke into tiny pieces. He was very angry with Ariana because she had spent her whole life hoping for the emperor's kindness, and he could not stand that. Meanwhile, the emperor looked at her with disappointment, and complaints poured in from the hall, demanding that the heiress be given a fitting punishment. Waves of mud covered her one after another, and the king continued to become disappointed. Disappointed that his favorite contender was in such a difficult situation. It is at moments like these that she comes to the realization of why she has been trying all this time, what she wanted to achieve. Her mother was not particularly kind and spent all of Ariana's money, then died. The brother died filled with hatred, blaming his mother for his death, and the emperor abandoned her without remorse. She didn't understand what she had done wrong, why she had lived the life she had, what she had been given, and yet they began to hate her. She always wanted to become a proud daughter and sister, so that her family could look at her and say everything that was most sincere. She trained hard to keep up with her brothers, who could overtake her at any moment. Well, there was no one on her side. The emperor considered all the accusations and decided to give his verdict. She was sentenced to be stripped of her title of princess for 2 years, which is not good. But that wasn't all. Now she also has to work in the dirtiest places of the palace while being stripped of her title. The emperor decided to ask her if she would have a few final words. She thought about the request. Unexpectedly, he asked her such a question. She had to think about it. She had great hopes that she would have decent living conditions for these 2 years. These words were followed by a lightning-fast reaction from the audience, which again began to pour rot and dirt on her, as if she were a murderer of hundreds or thousands of people. It was a burden for her to listen to this nonsense and rubbish from people who have no idea what is in the soul of a beauty. Well, the time has come. The emperor gave the order to the guards to take the criminal to prison. Even in this situation, she was calm. The guards were dragging her into a long confinement, and she had no reason to worry. But one guy in the crowd gave her no peace. He looked at her arrogantly, as if he had seen what he had been waiting for. Chris crossed his arms at chest level, looking down at her. It felt like everyone had been waiting for this moment when she would no longer be a competitor in the battle for the throne. She, more than anyone, understood that she could not say a word to him, since she needed to restore her title and get out of the palace. And suddenly, in the midst of deathly silence, this scoundrel spoke up. He, like everyone else, decided to laugh at her. calling her poor Ariana. He spoke with such pleasure that no one else in the room shouted. It felt like he was the one involved in the crime. Rage flared up in her, her gaze reminding her of a predator that would bite its enemy by the neck at any moment. She could not tolerate these terrible words directed at her and snatched the sword from the guard's sheath. But this freak was not afraid of anything. He continued to smile with a certain malicious glee. When she put the blade to his neck, time froze. They literally found themselves on the other side. The Emperor raised his hand up, and a golden aura appeared around it, emitting a lot of energy. After His Majesty's intervention, the blade fell to the floor with a crash, which was exactly what the scoundrel Chris had been expecting. The guard had just woken up. Although if it were up to her, she would have stabbed Chris to death without thinking about the consequences. And all he did was gloat, telling the guards to go away so that they wouldn't block the view. She herself had to kneel down, and bodyguards twisted her arms to put on handcuffs. Another order from the Emperor for them to finally take away this troublemaker. And she was very angry about this. She managed to understand that he had planned all this a long time ago, and everything went according to plan. And she fell for it like a fool. Well, and when he says goodbye, he won't wish her all the best. He will happily wait for her to return. Yeah, he will stand at the entrance to the palace with a cake and a candle. She looked back through the closing doors to see him, Chris, again. Well, he was the only one who stood and looked into this gap. His joy knew no bounds, and she suffered defeat. After some time, she was given clothes that looked more like a potato sack. The handcuffs were removed, and she was released into a new home. She was pushed by a guy from the guards. Even the bodyguards hate her. How hard it is to tolerate the antics of these fools. From the jolt, she realized that no one would pity her here, or wait for her with a warm dinner. Only cute horses. She couldn't believe that she would have to live, sleep, eat, and drink in a stable for 2 years. Even the guards gloated at her, saying that even here she would be able to rule like a true empress. The handcuffs squeezed her hand tightly. She rubbed her wrist and tried to calm herself down, setting herself in the right mood. Our Ariana asks herself what that guard is about, how to rule here, by whom. Judging by the ceiling, the princess won't have a hot night tonight, and there will always be someone flying among the horses. But suddenly someone entered the stable reluctantly, or walking was a burden to him. The stranger turned out to be an old man, a certain head of the village, who gave his first order for her to bring water. It seemed to her that she knew in advance that everything would happen this way, since the imperial family quickly changes its attitude. She finally got the water they asked her for, but she still needed to put everything in order. Just a couple of days ago, she was loved by the Emperor, and now she's cleaning the stables and helping all sorts of rabble. Ariana did everything to be recognized, accepted all kindness at its true value, so that everyone could be confident in her reputation. But what did she get on the day of the trial? All her efforts were worth it, because on that day she was absolutely alone against a crowd of animals that were ready to tear her apart. She understood that Chris would be very happy to see her here, in such rags and with a broom in her hands. Time passed, and the moon replaced the sun in the sky, and many stars covered the dark ceiling. At the meeting, she asked to at least give her a normal bed, but who would listen to her? Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and in surprise, she asked what was there. It turns out that they brought her dinner, but from the looks of it, it doesn't look like the palace's best chefs had worked hard on it. She was not happy with such delicacies. Her whole face spoke of it. Otherwise, there would have been indescribable delight. She touched the bread, felt it, looked at it, and said that the bread was very hard, like a stone, and the soup was thin to boot. Even with such pride, she realized that she had fallen to the very bottom, from which she would not climb out for a long time. Meanwhile, morning had come. The birds were chirping, the sun was pouring down its rays, and a warm breeze was tickling the skin. At such an early hour, our heroine is already on her feet and ready to work. Overnight, she suddenly realized that she could no longer live as before. The old man met her and was surprised that she had been here all this time. What was this? As it turned out, a lot of weeds had grown around the palace that shouldn't have been there, and she was the one who was given the task of dealing with that. And she behaved really strangely. She responded to this request with a strange smile, as if she had something in mind. Grandpa was also surprised. In his head, he couldn't even imagine that she would smile in such a place. He also added that she was crazy and that she had forgotten her scissors, as if she had no head on her shoulders. but Ariana definitely has something in mind. She won't be voluntarily removing the weeds. A perfect but very bad thought entered her head as she lit a match. The beauty decided to burn all the weeds so as not to bother with them for so long, but she might also turn someone else into ashes. She was very keen for the flames to spread to the palace so that they would all know who they were messing with. The fire was getting closer to the palace with every second. The tongues of flame were rushing upward, wanting to burn everything in its path. The villagers noticed this horror. No one could even imagine who could come up with such a terrible idea. But a second later, it dawned on them that only an impudent princess could have thought of this. And then they grabbed her. After her antics, she will have to sit on her knees and answer questions about whether it was she who, under the pretext of clearing weeds, decided to burn down the castle. The guard asked her to confess to everything, whether she was guilty of arson or someone else. Ariana finally looked up and asked if he would believe her if she said she was innocent. The man exhaled heavily, as he could not say a word to her question about what to answer. Well, according to the chief of the guard, it looks more like an accident, so it's unlikely that she will be held accountable for her actions. He noted that she would be free for some time, and now he would give evidence to the imperial family. Let them decide. Another day passed. In the evening, one of the guards came to watch her. She could not believe that the emperor gave such an order. At this rate, they'll keep sending disabled people here. And while this fool is sniveling in his sleep, she'll run away and do something again. Soon, she will completely lose her composure. And if they continue to bring such slackers for 2 months, she will not be able to restrain herself. Still, she was confident in herself and that everything would be fine, or rather, better than necessary. The next day came. There was a pogrom in the village. Someone let the horses out, and now all the workers were chasing them. In front of the idle man, she pretended that she had nothing to do with anything, twirled her fingers in her ears, and the villagers asked for help. Setup after setup, one after another, she plotted against the local people, and the guards could do nothing. 6 months passed, and she continued to set people up. They were already really fed up with it. Some people didn't care about all this anymore. They said that this wasn't the first or even the second time this had happened, and they just had to come to terms with it. The screams spread throughout the entire village about how this gray-haired brat had ruined everything again. She heard everything perfectly well, lying in the hayloft. In such weather, all I would do is enjoy life. A clear sky with a sparkling sun and airy clouds. But it wasn't easy for her to accept the role of a loser who lost everything in one moment. Poverty also brings a lot of trouble. Living with soup for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is no pleasure. And there's also a cold blanket. There is disgusting soup and stone bread. This is not tasting delicacies. It is as if they are prepared so poorly for her. She definitely needs to come up with something, otherwise she already understands that she won't last even a couple of months here. Suddenly, in the midst of the silence, she heard female voices discussing the imperial family with particular interest. Ariana recognized them. They were the maids who worked in the palace, and they were gossiping about them. One of the maids put her finger to her mouth and asked the other to remain silent about what she had said, while the heroine realized that even outside the palace there would be gossip. She managed to understand that she could use this to her advantage. Such information should not fall into the hands of the imperial family. When she finally said it, the girls were very scared because they understood that the imperial family would not spare anyone. But our sweetheart is not going to set them up. She offers to tell them even more interesting things, and besides, at least it will be the truth. Ariana remembered the prince they were discussing, and so they fell into her trap. Time passed, and the girls let the heroine in for lunch. In exchange, she told them about all the prince's mistresses and secret conspiracies. During dinner, they literally had time to discuss everyone in the royal family. Some prince has a mistress who turns out to be a servant. Meanwhile, Ariana was savoring the aroma of this wonderful food. That stew would never be able to compare to it, but for this she was going to make a lot of noise. At least she knows that because of these silly girls, she won't have to think about food for a while. One of the girls remembered the 14th princess, who had long been of marriageable age, but could not find a husband. The other maid thought that the princess would wait a long time, since there was still one big fish. The girls did not immediately understand who this big fish was that the girl was talking about. As it turned out, they remembered the Marquis, a gold businessman who controls most of the railroads passing through major cities, owns many gold mines. But because he is alone, there are many rumors about him. Predatory girls assume that this golden antelope hides hundreds of lovers behind its broad back. The girls beamed when they discussed young rich men and princes, but from their conversations one could understand that they knew everything about the imperial family and their close associates. Ariana understands that there is nothing better for maids than to gossip at work, and suddenly she was asked if she knew anything about the Marquis. After all, they had seen each other. They were very interested, and she saw this as a profit, since for a few words about him she could get another loaf of bread. Unfortunately, when she became a contender for the throne, the Marquis had already left the country, and the girls were very upset. But she knew something about the Baron's daughter, who ran away one night. The girls realized that the lady was talking about Lady Rhonda. Finally, something interesting for the girls. Evening came. She sold almost all the information about the aristocrats and was in warmth for it. As a result, she will be able to stock up on food in exchange for information. In case of cold weather, they will bring her firewood. Due to the terrible and sometimes even vile behavior of the aristocrats, she can get a lot of useful things for herself. She continued to sit by the fire, thoughtfully watching the wood smoldering, as if her dreams of a brilliant future. But she wasn't even supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be a princess, she said, straightening the wood. She was born into a small family on the outskirts of the Northern Empire, and got here thanks to her divine power. This power could only be obtained by those who had the blood of a god in their veins, making it special among others. People with such power and high position could enter the imperial family. Initially, the girl doubted the proposal as she was worried about her family. But the emperor signed an agreement so that her brother Charles and mother could go with her. No one could refuse such a thing. Ariana's mother was beaming with happiness. Her smile was brighter than the sun, which had never shone in the north. Charles and Ariana were even happier. The whole family was together, and no one had to be sacrificed. At least she thought that the family could be saved, that they could always be together. But here's the problem. After getting into the castle, Ariana's relatives became angrier and more aggressive, and her mother attacked the servants time after time. The maid begged for mercy, asked Madame to calm down, but deep down she imagined the most terrible consequences. The mother was very angry. She asked the maid if she knew whose mother she was. Yes, she was Ariana's mother. Her patience finally snapped. She wanted to grab the impudent maid by the scruff of the neck and throw her far, far away. She continued, "I am the mother of Ariana," the Ariana that the emperor himself recognized. The maid continued to beg for mercy. Meanwhile, Charles and Ariana looked at all this in horror. They were speechless, as if they had never seen her so scary, angry, and aggressive before. He couldn't calm the younger one down in any way. His naturally green eyes looked at her with such heaviness. The brother realized that it was better for him to close the door. It was better for her not to see this horror. Ariana herself was very surprised, even shocked, since she probably had never seen her mother like this. And Charles also couldn't come to terms with this completely. He said that Ariana hadn't come for a long time anyway, and now she saw this. She grabbed the sleeve with her hand, saying that everything was fine, but all her actions said otherwise. However, she turned around again and said that she was going somewhere again. In such situations, it is clear that she is simply abandoning them, and not they, her. But her brother hasn't forgotten her at all. He can't come to terms with the fact that Ariana, his sister, is constantly leaving for the emperor, which will later result in a gigantic problem. The guy hugged her tightly, telling her not to overdo it, even for them. She was unexpectedly very happy. Her brother certainly knew how to calm the younger one. After all, they had been together for so many years. Ariana herself reacted angrily to all this, you see. It was too strange for her. They waved goodbye to each other, but something about the farewell felt off. After all, Charles suffered the greatest pain in the whole family. He didn't just hug his sister, he wanted her to stay with him. His face was too sad. Sadness filled him. There was no longer that sparkle in his green eyes, and he himself understood that at this rate Ariana would leave them. Mother thought that Charles was blaming her for the fact that they were now hidden in the palace. She put her hand to her chest and said that she was as good-natured as her daughter, Ariana. And a mother never betrays her flesh and blood. She is a mother. Afterwards, she smiled wickedly, continuing that they just needed to accept the girl's kindness. In the palace, the heroine only became sadder. Nothing gave her pleasure. She always tried to please the emperor, bowed to him better than anyone else when they met, and lived only to be the emperor's favorite. While her daughter was trying to gain the emperor's respect, her mother took power upon herself and began committing atrocities. Ariana sacrificed everything for this, and her mother wanted her to gain the emperor's recognition. After some time, Charles also left her, and later the emperor's trust disappeared. She became too greedy, trying to become the emperor's favorite, did everything for this, gave the last thing she had. And she realized this only when she lost everyone who had previously held her hand. Her whole life shattered into pieces. And for what reason? Now she's sick to her stomach when she hears about this imperial family who changed their attitude towards people like gloves. 3 years passed after that moment. Her title was restored, but she spent an extra year without achieving anything. She had no interest in life left. She just looked out the window at the beautiful views. What's going on in her head is unknown to anyone. Maybe nothing. Maybe something useful. Also, no one cared about her condition. The maid suddenly came to her and disturbed her peace. It turns out that she needs the lady to go out because she needs to clean up here. Ariana stood up and said yes, then walked out of the room, her heels clicking. Then the second maid arrived and asked why her partner was staring at one spot. The maid became curious as to why this girl always sat by the window, and the second one understood why the first one didn't know anything, since she was new after all. Behind her back, they called her the shame of the imperial family, just because she was falsely accused of murdering her brother. The new girl was very afraid that the mistress might hear them, but the other one didn't care. And no one else did after all. Ariana had spent 2 years in the stable, and the last year she had done nothing. Even if Ariana heard everything, she couldn't respond because they were absolutely right. As sad as it was, she was deposed from her title as the emperor's successor, sat in the stables for 2 years, and then spent a year doing nothing. Ariana went from being the emperor's beloved heir to being unwanted trash and a disgrace to the family. Only 2 years had passed since then, and the emperor decided not to even give her any power, since she had lost all her influence. This is precisely why the palace becomes a hell for an incompetent member of the imperial family, with the rotten tongues of flame from the local demons and freaks. Fighting for the throne in a bloody battle where brothers and sisters plot against each other, there is no place for her here, so she can only run away from here. Even if she is defective, she remains a member of the imperial family, which will not let her go until her death. In this bird she sees herself, who is sitting in the same cage and cannot get out. All that remains is to look out the windows of the entire palace and endure the words of everyone in the castle. Everyone around sees in her only the shame of the imperial family. She let the bird go. It was clearly not happy to be there either, even if it was fed. But freedom turned out to be much more valuable than all the money and food. From her sweet little face, it was clear that she would have been very happy to flap her wings, to grab air under each one, and to soar above these people, each of whom was worse than the other deep down. She instantly stopped dreaming and considered this monologue too pathetic. Previously, she acted like the main character of some novel. But she is not like that at all. She needs to come up with something to get driven away. Suddenly, a maid entered and called the heroine, who did not even expect her arrival. But the maid arrived on time. She warned that tea time was coming soon. After these words, Ariana beamed. She told the maid that she would be here soon, but from the maid's trembling voice, it becomes clear that the heroine does not go there often. The tea party was almost over, and it was the Empress's turn to talk to the 20 heirs. Ariana sat away from everyone and ate sweets and tea, not making a sound from her. She accidentally touched the same cookies that the other sister wanted to take, and that's how they collided. She even tried to ask for forgiveness from the one who hated her, but she only removed her hand, demonstrating even more hatred towards her. After the title was restored, she began to like this event less. As it turned out, the brothers and sisters did nothing but come up with various nicknames. The redneck sister was outraged that she touched the cookie and asked the waiter to change it quickly. Ariana was even more indignant. She didn't want to throw away the food and grabbed a piece for herself. She didn't care how much abuse she would have to endure. She didn't care that she was ranked 20th out of 20 heirs. She would eat cookies. Suddenly, the sound of a knock on a crystal glass echoed throughout the room. The Empress decided to give a toast, asking everyone to focus on her and her words. First, she wanted to thank everyone for being here. At this point, the tea party had to end, and she again thanked everyone for the wonderful time they had all spent together. And so she decided to leave them when someone behind her said that she was wrong, and this someone was clearly very upset about something. He found fault with her words when she said that everyone was present at the tea party. His name was Leo, the third prince on the list of heirs, who noticed that there were not enough people at all. Leo kept telling her that she should have noticed literally half the empty seats that had been empty since the event began. A gloomy atmosphere filled the hall as two very important people for the empire met in confrontation. Everyone present understood that Leo wielded enormous power, which fluctuated between places in the rankings. No one had ever dared to be insolent to the Empress before, and she herself could not say anything to him. But our heroine noticed this oppressive atmosphere that was destroying her appetite to smithereens. Suddenly, he lowered his heavy gaze to Ariana. Thus, he decided to mention that he is always present at these kinds of events that some do not attend. It was this eye contact that irritated her, which put the most pressure on her. The Empress lowered her head, showing that Leo was going too far and behaving inappropriately, and she called his name in a heavy voice. She noted that those who didn't come were probably very busy, each had a good reason. As a brother, Leo should understand them. He hissed in response to the Empress. He definitely didn't like her answer. The Empress decided to act wisely. Without answering Leo, she crumpled the dress in her hands. She looked around, smiled and thanked him, saying that she would be the first to leave and that they would meet again for dinner. Her opponent lost this battle, and the indistinct voices of the brothers and sisters could be heard in the hall. Leo was completely ridiculed, the Empress was much calmer, and the brothers were discussing his defeat on the sidelines. He will remember this tea party for a long time. For him, it was a feast of shit, where everyone tries to take a bigger spoonful. Later, they will say that they were pretending. Immediately behind him came his pawns, who follow their master Leo every step in order to hide behind his back. One of the sisters laughed at the behavior of the pawns that followed Leo. Those guys at the table also came under her attack. Suddenly, one of the candidates stood up from his seat. He was clearly angry, very angry. But suddenly, he decided to fight with Ariana, or shift all the blame onto her, because only she is to blame for the conflict between Leo and the Empress. He hit Ariana's table with a crash, but she was not at all afraid of his force, as if he was the one looking death in the eye. A thunderclap rumbled between them, an incredible clash of inferior contenders. She was on the edge. Everything was going beyond all bounds for her. The look of that impudent Leo, that scoundrel who decided to shift all the blame onto her. But Ariana was just a smart girl. After analyzing him, she decided that there was no point in talking to him, so she simply ignored him. But this only irritated him more. The tension grew, and from such insolence especially, she lost control. The prince was very angry with him. This ignoring was fatal for her. But her patience was not eternal. He threw her mug on the floor, which was the last straw in their dialogue. Now she is not going to remain silent. Now he will be the one listening to her. He will endure her humiliation. She will drive him into the floor and he will never get out of there again. So here it goes. Ariana wasn't going to come here to listen to this nonsense. She was silent the whole tea party, and what has she done now? In this case, he decided to dump all the problems on her. And it was she who had to be to blame, since some Leo was not in the mood. Meanwhile, the sisters and brothers laughed and discussed their conflict, as was their custom, and the brother continued to accuse her of hating them. But suddenly, the assistant sister came up and decided to calm her brother down. This is our Nella, who was also laughing behind their backs, but then decided to stand up for Ariana, thinking that she had done nothing. But here she was, even impudent, calling her life an eyesore, as if only her existence irritated Prince Leo. The heroine was tired of listening to nonsense from her brother. He talked about her insignificance, and what a burden she was to the imperial family. Again, she decided to remain silent and forgive the fool, since he would only chatter. But while he was chatting about his own business, he didn't even notice how Ariana left. But his sister Nella replaced him in this. As soon as he noticed this insolence, he clearly became even more angry. It felt like no one would have stopped her. But her brother dared to touch her and grab her by the shoulder, which only made her lose her temper. The beauty had suffered enough and something came into her head. It was not for nothing that she decided to grab the kettle. Sometimes they talked too much. She endured the same amount of laughter in her direction. But her patience ended there. The boy didn't expect any reaction from her at all. She literally smeared him across the wall. A storm of emotions swept through the tea party. Ariana finally stopped listening to nonsense, and even responded to them. The brother turned out to be a real weakling. An ordinary girl knocked him to the ground, and Nella immediately jumped up to him. But the heroine wasn't going to end it there. She tramples them into the ground. Just like they did to her, she tells them that in comparison to her, in Leo's eyes, they are all on the same level. And pushing their problems onto other brothers and sisters is already a tradition for them. She's too great at calling them insects because they're trying to act cool by talking badly about each other. The prince bared his teeth in anger. She continued to humiliate them magnificently in front of everyone. But they did not dare open their mouths. Ariana understood that she had said everything that needed to be said. There was no point in saying anything extra. She thanked them and said goodbye. Even so, he couldn't calm down. The dirty prince stood up, calling the heroine crazy. He didn't want to allow that she would just leave here, but his voice was shaking badly. Why was he so scared? The beauty realized that boiling water was not enough for him. A gilded chair would suit him, and a couple of bruises on his face would be even better. After all, scars make a man look good. His voice suddenly froze. His life had already flashed before his eyes a couple of times. And yet she was an incredibly strong and beautiful girl. The boy finally got what he deserved for his big mouth. He never expected that something like this could happen to him today. But Ariana didn't care about his words. She did as he wanted and left without gifts. Afterwards, she rushed to the bedroom, never to return to this place again. As it turns out, the Empress's castle has royal chambers where pretenders to the throne check in when they go to dinner. This place is a real mansion, and only for one person. Even Ariana herself noted that she should come here more often. This will be a great chance for her to sleep on a good bed for a long time. She just decided to try out the bed. During the entire tea party, she became very tired, realizing that she still had to go to dinner that evening. Again and again, she will have to listen to all the intrigues of her brothers and sisters. Only there will no longer be only members of the imperial family. She couldn't stop thinking about being kicked out of the palace. She wanted to do something in a public place, and dinner would be the best solution for her. The official horror is a significant event attended not only by members of the imperial family, but also by famous aristocrats. In anticipation of the dinner party, guests will be beaming with joy and cooing sweetly among themselves. But as soon as the body of a member of the imperial family appears in one of the corridors, their appetite will disappear instantly. Still, she has a chance of success. If the soldiers save her, she might at least survive. And later I will throw her out myself, since I have already disgraced myself twice. In such cases, they give a second, but last chance. But even if you're unlucky, it will be much better than hearing all this a second time. This plan is the final solution to all her problems for her. No one will bother her anymore. But she was afraid that it would hurt, very painfully. She touched her neck and felt this heaviness. It's much more painful to admit that you're in a cage with bars of thorns that dig deep into your skin. She can't stay here for long, but should prepare everything for the shame of the imperial family. But suddenly the sound of someone's footsteps spread throughout the room. Ariana was very scared by this. From his shoes, it was immediately clear that he was a stately man. But what did he lose in the room of the universally hated Ariana? This would have surprised everyone. In the same room with her was the incredibly famous Marquis, whom everyone talks about with such trepidation. He said that her plan sounded just terrible. And what was terrible was how he heard her thoughts. She didn't say a single bit of the action out loud. What seemed even stranger to her was how he got here, who let him in, and what he was talking about. He tried his best to explain that it was not what she thought. In fact, he wanted to discuss something with her, and the front door just happened to be open. He also added that he had wanted to meet her for a long time, but had never had a chance. This meeting will be significant for him, and what they discuss will be very important for her, I predict to you. Ariana, however, was calm. She thought it would be impolite to burst into the lady's box without even introducing herself. But suddenly her gaze changed. At first she didn't recognize him, but we know who he is. She knew everyone who could safely wander around the Empress's castle, except for one person, that very person, since there was no one she did not know by sight. This one, whom she did not know by sight, was the one whom every maid, courtier, and ordinary so longed for. It was the rich man of this empire, Marquis Joseph, who is the emperor of the business world, a priceless youth. Having mentioned his name, she also wondered how this rich kid knew about her plans, since they were meeting for the first time. He smiled sweetly and said that he was incredibly glad that she recognized him, and most importantly, that she recognized him. He brought his hand to hers. This first contact should have happened long ago, but now it looks much more impressive. The Marquis knelt down and kissed her wrists, greeting her in no other way than formally. After the kiss, he said that, unfortunately, Her Highness's plan would fail miserably. Nothing would come of it. She was even more amazed, because this guy somehow knew everything about her secret plan, which no one else could know about except her. The heroine indignantly asked where he came from and how he knew everything about her, who he even was. He rose from his knees, still holding her hand, but she continued asking about the same topic. What did he know? The Marquis asked her to sit down, as his story could be very long. As it turned out, the plan would be able to put her on the throne. But it would not be what she wanted, not at all. How could she get to the throne? She didn't understand at all what the Marquis was talking about. How could she take the throne and regret it? This is how it will be, according to the Marquis. After the suicide attempt, the rope will break, and the fall will create 2 large scars on her face. At dinner, everyone would laugh at her even more. Even those who had somehow maintained a conversation with her would side with the offenders. Afterwards, she decides to take a different path, and with her incredible strength, she will destroy all her brothers and sisters without any conscience or pity. Those who laughed at her were imprisoned, some were forced to do hard labor, and others were sold into slavery. And this thorny path led her to literally seizing the throne. There she was, holding the highest title in the country, her beautiful face adorned with horrific scars. Yes, Ariana managed to take her place on the throne, but how many victims were behind her? How much blood was shed for the sake of an empty throne? She managed to rule like Empress Ariana, forever alone, in the same confinement of the palace. The Marquis suddenly asked her if what he had just told her was surprising. He also added that the shame of the imperial family would take the place of the emperor, and the whole country would be surprised. She remained silent to this statement, but she wanted to say what kind of nonsense this madman was talking. How did he know what would happen in the future? In the future, opinions about her will be divided, but there will be no one who will think well of her. Some will consider her the murderer of the entire imperial family, while others will consider her a tyrant ruler who brought glory to the empire. She was already tired of listening to this scoundrel, and thoughts were already beginning to arise that he had serious problems with his head. Even so, she managed to achieve national prestige and was awarded many things. But in the end, she achieved the decapitation of her head because tyranny and the desire to kill prevailed in her. It was a very sad end for her, with no value compared to her potential. Apparently, she was at her limit listening to this. She asked him to stop so she could say her piece. Ariana asked him not to talk such nonsense anymore, which she had not yet seen, and which also appeared out of nowhere, which was very suspicious for her. If he wanted to write a novel, Ariana suggested creating a publishing house. But he didn't want to stop. The Marquis said that he had rushed into everything. Suddenly, his gaze became like that of a predator. He remembered some technique for transmitting memories. She was surprised by this. Or rather, she couldn't believe that he had such a technique. It certainly wasn't easy. The handsome man managed to notice the heroine's insight, which she demonstrated quite well. As a result of minimal contact, he is able to transmit the necessary memories to a person, so to speak, a conductor of information. He came closer, his shoes tapping on the floor. He said that his story, which he told a minute earlier, was not a fiction. The Marquis leaned towards her, trying to put pressure on her, and said that everything that was said had already happened. The princess could not contradict him in any way. He had an ability that could confirm everything he said. He was clearly glad that she didn't kick, as before, and could no longer deny that he was right. The Marquis extended his hand to her and said that he was giving her the opportunity to test his words. The beauty smiled maliciously at the fact that he was offering her such a thing, and added that she should simply believe him and take his hand. But all his intentions are absolutely pure. As soon as she orders him to go away, the very moment he will not be here. But she couldn't understand if he was playing with her. But if she just needed to touch his hand, then there was nothing to lose. She said in that case, and at that point her voice broke off. A strange aura, a strange light appeared above their hands. Ariana's eyes widened in complete disbelief at what was happening in front of her. An incredibly strong glow filled the room. One touch caused a lot of energy, incredible power. After the touch, her legs couldn't support her. Her eyelids became heavier, as if she was falling asleep. Gentleman Marquis caught her and pressed her head to his chest so that she would not fall. In some cases, he was even sure that Her Highness would want to know the truth. What would happen next after her rash actions? She was definitely unconscious. The Marquis laid her on the bed and wished that this would be her last suffering in her life. As it turned out, it was just a dream in which she somehow ended up in the palace dungeon. Suddenly, our heroine found herself in the memory of Marquis Joseph. Her eyes opened, and the scene began. She was very surprised by what she saw in front of her. Gray walls, a grate from which light streamed in the shape of waffles onto the floor of the cell, and she, morally destroyed. Looking at herself in the future, she still could not come to terms with the fact that this was happening precisely in his subconscious. Suddenly, a strange rumble began in the corridor. The current Ariana noticed someone, but the second one didn't care about anything. The guard reported that he had brought the last guest of the condemned Ariana, who turned out to be the Marquis. He told the guard that it would be quite enough for him, so he did not have to enter the cell. The guard wanted to object to him, but a stray drop of sweat stopped him, like a lump in his throat. The Marquis pressed him, telling him to listen to him as he was angry. But the present-day Ariana couldn't believe that the last person she called was Marquis Joseph. After all, there were still extra ears here that heard all the extra noise they created. She was interested in what the heroine wanted to discuss back then, when she was imprisoned before her death. With a saddened voice, the Marquis began to report on the deaths, which were multiples of 1,000. The rebels, by order of Her Highness, must be exterminated. The imprisoned Ariana, with her head bowed, continued to remain silent. Not a word came to her. Such was the stone on her soul. The Marquis waited for an answer from her, but received silence, which had been going on here for a long time. There was no sign of malice or anger on him. It was as if a burden of grief hung on him that he could not bear, and every second became torture for him. He knelt before her, clearly wanting to say something but lacking the strength. Still, he started. He told her that he wanted to talk to her, paused briefly and started talking about how he had suggested that she run away. But what did he get? She was silent for a while with her mouth open, but still apologized to him. Ariana looked at her copy and the copy of the Marquis, who were discussing a very important topic. As it turned out, he had warned her about someone in advance so that she would be wary of him. But all she did was ignore his advice and suggestions, which led to this situation. The heroine with the scar repeated in a quiet voice that she felt guilty and was very sorry for this. But he was cruel to her today. The Marquis said that he was not going to listen to her apologies here. But in fact, he was very afraid of the guard who was listening to everything. If he weren't there, he would have supported her with all his might. This guard bothers them very much. If they were alone, he would pour out his whole soul and protect them from everything. The Marquis pulled his hand heavily towards her, and it twitched like a tree branch in the wind. But he couldn't touch her. He wanted the day to come when he could make such a promise to her. The dream ended. She woke up with her eyes wide open, sweat of fear running down her face. It was a real nightmare for her. She stood up with the same abruptness, sighing loudly. She was clearly surprised. The Marquis had been reading a book all this time to entertain himself, but he noticed that his princess had woken up. She spoke with the same heaviness as her copy in the dream, about what she could have done back then to lead to this. According to the Marquis, she created a bloodbath in the palace, killed without pity or decency, simply took people's lives. More than 1,000 innocent inhabitants of the empire were killed by her hands, which were already elbow-deep in blood. True, all this led her to the outcome that she achieved through her own initiative. Waking up from her sleep, meeting his gaze, she remembered several words he had said to her. He was looking forward to their meeting. These were the words she remembered then. The Marquis grabbed her wrist more tightly, and she was very surprised by this. His desire was too strong. He begged her to do everything in her power to make sure that he could always protect her, even if it meant death. Besides, the handsome man wanted her to listen to a certain proposal of his. She asked herself many questions about what proposal awaited her, why he was doing all this for her. Brother Marquis really wanted to help Her Majesty solve this problem, and then he smiled sincerely. But she still didn't understand what made him act for her. She had asked herself this question even in her dream. Also, Sister Ariana did not understand whether she was close enough to have such conversations with him. He smiled and said that she had previously definitely dreamed of becoming an outstanding ruler. According to her, he hit the nail on the head. Moreover, the Marquis added that, if she so desired, she could push the entire imperial family into the abyss. In this pursuit of the crown, she can always become empress if she only allows the Marquis to make her happy. He doesn't care whether she becomes a tyrant ruler or a just empress. He needs her to make him her pawn. There was no hidden intention visible on his face, as if he were a real angel. Everyone around her despises her. Everyone hates her to the depths of their hearts. And the magnificent Marquis Joseph wants to become her pawn. The sister was in the mood for a scandal. She asked him to listen to her, calling his name in a special tone. She thought she had him figured out. Thought he was trying to trick her, so she suggested he find someone dumber. The brother said that as soon as he woke up, he realized that he was in the past, that all of this had already happened. He grabbed her hand tightly to gain her trust. Suddenly, he started talking about another topic, about how she might not understand him, or maybe even the opposite, since she was very perceptive. His sister was stunned by his harshness. These touches took her back to the times when her brother Charles was there, who also hugged her tightly. But in reality, what's important to him is that she breathes, is alive, and just stands in front of him. That will be enough. In front of her, he seemed to be losing his mind, becoming a dangerous predator that would devour her. And it was clear that this frightened her. His gaze remained unchanged, as if she were looking at a statue that felt no emotion. Ariana doesn't understand why he can't take his eyes off her. His gaze mortally wounds her. She felt something in this man that was lost in him. And with every second she spent with him, she felt worse and worse. The heroine pushed him away. He irritated her with all his heart. She simply could not be in the same company with him. She asked him to never show his face again. Never, never again. The Marquis continued to stand there in a stupor from what had just happened to him, but she realized that she had wasted too much time on this madman. She noticed that it had long since gotten dark outside. The stars painted the sky with their glow, which meant that it was already time for dinner. It had all already begun, but she couldn't help but go there. It was too late to give up on her destiny. But she doesn't know at all whether the future that Marquis Joseph predicted is real, whether he is a crazy psycho or someone who wants to help her. Now the only thing that matters to her is to cope with this terrifying situation that will overtake her any minute. The hall was a masterpiece of beauty, with gilded chandeliers, patterns, and a wonderful view of the diamond stars. She finally entered without making a sound, but the room was in a real buzz. Everyone was talking about someone with particular zeal. The brothers and sisters were discussing someone again, but this time something confused her, as if something in their words was wrong. So it seemed to her that they were talking specifically about her, and now they skillfully changed the topic so that she wouldn't notice anything. These behaved in exactly the same way, discussing some rich elderly man who would marry a 16-year-old princess. The imperial family's palace is very harsh with those who do not intend to do everything according to the rules, fight for the throne, or disgrace the family name. Some are even sold. This girl is just that. She was sold like a thing, although she was previously a princess, but for her inaction, she becomes an outcast. Ariana thinks it's better to be sold for the price of an imperial woman, but it doesn't matter. Someone noticed her. That impudent fellow was definitely not in a kind mood. His keen eye noticed that our heroine was creeping up, in his words, like a rat. This freak turned out to be the same disgraced boy from the tea party, who even here called her a disgrace to the imperial family. Our clever one noticed that Ariana didn't show her face, which means she understood her place. But despite him, everything goes wrong. She didn't like listening to his nonsense about how she had overslept in such a luxurious room. The other brothers and sisters also threw in their 2 cents. The beauty took a glass of sparkling champagne. She was definitely up to something. And so it turned out, she pointed the glass straight at her brother, and he trembled as soon as he saw it at his nose. It was time to laugh at him. To spite him, she told him that she had wandered around the hall on purpose to find her beloved brother and treat him. She didn't think of stopping. She managed to tell him that he was like a busy dog who was waiting for his owner. He was already on the verge of cutting off this impudent woman's head a couple of times, but she always turns out to be much smarter than him. His hands were shaking with anger, and his sister Ariana continued drinking the caviar, not paying any attention to him. He came closer, asking why she could only speak out in safe places. But suddenly, a woman's fan appeared between them, which stopped their quarrel for a second. Sister Nella. Here she is. Here she was, far from her brother. But as soon as the conflict arose, she was right there. You see, Ariana cannot talk like that to her brother with such a hierarchy. Nella continued to ask her not to disgrace the name of the imperial family, but Ariana noticed that her sister began to talk a lot when she joined her brother. Then she was finished off. The heroine told Sister Nella to quietly giggle in the crowd as before, and not talk much, because her mouth smelled like slop. Girls' screams immediately poured out at her. How could she speak like that? What nonsense was she talking? It was all our Nella. In fact, she had warned her to watch her language, but it was so brazen, it was as if someone had gagged her with a rag. Her brother reassured her not to fall for the heroine's provocations, but that would be the end of her arrogance, says the prince. Now he gives the conditions that she should politely apologize to them and everything will be fine, but she states that she is not to blame for her sister's bad smell. Nella was furious. Her red face was not hidden even by her large fan. But the prince stopped her again. She was already fed up with them, but her brother, the prince, decided that he was the boss here and would solve the problem of arrogance on his own. He offered her the confiscation of half of the budget. If, of course, she would think about it and apologize properly, then he would think about it. This fifth prince is the most important figure of the infamous hellish third mansion. He asked her if she would complain about his incredibly honest decision. But she couldn't be convinced by this, she said. What would half of her already small budget deprive her of? And what will she do? How will she act? His voice trembled. He was afraid of her, asking himself these questions. She raised her glass of champagne and said she'd better show him what she would do with it. Ariana was too determined not to do the same thing a second time and poured the glass straight into him. Nella became very worried about her brother, who was groaning in pain. She effectively placed the glass on the servant's tray and added that her brother the prince could not have expected this a second time. She felt sorry to look at him, because once again he had fallen for the same trick and was not even able to react. Suddenly, someone interrupted the conversation. Someone with a very familiar voice and similar shoes. Ariana seemed to understand who this stranger was who praised her for such clever scandals. She turned to him and noticed the impudent man who had been told to his face to go away, but he was denying it. The brother put his hand to his chest, saying that these scandals were not worth it for her to just leave him alone. A strange noise began in the hall. Many people's voices intertwined into an incomprehensible mess. And those two were again in full view of everyone. She repeated that she had warned him not to come near her. So what was he doing here again? The Marquis rubbed his chin with his hand and said that he had not heard her proper response to the fact that she had driven him away. He had not heard the reason for refusing to let him become her knight. Meanwhile, the crowd of onlookers discussed the heroes. They couldn't believe that Marquis Joseph himself had offered to become her knight, while others continued that the boy wanted to use her and that he was quite mediocre. Nella's brother and sister assumed that the Marquis had offered to become her knight, and Ariana had refused him. He continued to stand with his head held high, while the voices behind him continued to ring. The heroine was in a precarious position. She definitely didn't want to listen to all this, but he seemed to continue to behave this way on purpose. Later, she turned away from everyone and said that there was no reason. They just needed to get away from her. The Marquis did not understand her behavior and decided to go to her, but he was stopped by Ariana's main offender to apologize to him for her behavior. He continued to say with a completely satisfied face that her attitude was not acceptable to the Marquis himself. At this point, Sid began to say too much, that the imperial family was concerned about her behavior, and he himself decided to show her his place. But at this point, the Marquis interrupted him. This attack was unexpected for him. The prince himself lost the confidence with which he came here. The Marquis pointed out that the imperial family itself was trying to teach something it did not know and asked him to get out of the way. At that very moment, Ariana looks at the views from the balcony alone, and it is clear that she is very upset by such events. Someone was also approaching the balcony. The sound of shoes was loud enough to go unheard. Ariana spoke in a quiet voice so that his conscience would finally awaken, and he would stop tormenting her. He responded by saying that he was just an idol of Her Majesty Ariana, whom he had admired for a long time. But she couldn't understand him. She wasn't going to fight for the throne, but he continued to haunt her. The Marquis tried to answer her. He thought that she didn't believe him. He knew that Sid would cut her budget. That was exactly the point, she thought. On top of everything else, rumors will circulate about her that she dared to refuse the Marquis. Everyone will talk about it, and they are already spreading. He grabbed Her Highness's hand and did not want to let her go under any circumstances. The Marquis saw the future, so he should know better what and how to do, which is precisely why he wants to help her. The brother didn't understand how much longer he would have to demonstrate the powers of a fortune teller, or whether he himself was not suitable for the role of a knight. If she was so worried about what all these insects were saying, then he told them, and she cut him off. She really wanted to know if the future was true. Then in the cherished future, they would be so close. At this point, their hands broke contact. He began to stutter loudly. Clearly, this topic was difficult for him. But here, the Marquis was sure that if everything were as Madame Ariana said, he would definitely show a different future. The beauty wanted to say something, but couldn't. And silence reigned on the lonely balcony. She analyzed him. He couldn't make such a sincere face to lie to her. Still, one cannot simply believe him, since the ability to see the future seems like science fiction, as if it were even possible. Suddenly, cries were heard that the Empress had arrived for dinner, and everyone greeted her with triumph. The Empress greeted everyone and was glad to meet everyone who came to such a significant event. Ariana was surprised that she arrived at the end. After all, it was not for nothing that everyone sat there until the end. From the outside, they looked stupid. Even Empress Anna noticed them and asked them to leave the terrace. In addition to her love for her biological son Chris, Anna was kind to all members of the imperial family. That's why she still talks even with Ariana, who was abandoned by everyone, but still, Her Majesty wanted to know if she had bothered them. The heroine bowed to her and said that everything was fine. They had just finished. Anna decided to joke with her, as if the Marquis didn't think so at all. And he even laughed. She suddenly became interested in what had influenced the Marquis himself to come here. He told her everything he wanted from Ariana, that he wanted to become a knight, but he didn't name his chosen one. He added that he was rejected almost immediately, and the beauty actively pretended that she had nothing to do with it. Anna laughed at this, but added that he was from a famous family. She began to guess that that child was very brave to refuse such an important person. The Marquis continued to smile back at her, but Ariana couldn't understand what this fool was planning. But she was not going to interfere in the affairs of a man and a woman, since she considered it wrong. Well, she was a very smart woman. Afterward, she said goodbye to them, and wished Joseph Marquis good luck with the one who was rejecting him. At a moment when no one heard them, he added that even the Empress herself had said so. By pursuing her, he tried to extract from her an agreement that she would choose him and only him. The Marquis wanted with all his might for her to sit on the throne and always be happy, for her life to always be filled with colors. But she repeated to him time and time again that she would not take the throne. This place was no longer her goal. The sixth princess, Madonna, was one of those few who communicated with Ariana, but she alone could not believe that she refused the Marquis. She said that if she were in her place, she would definitely agree, since such offers can happen once in a lifetime. Ariana didn't want to chat with her and asked her to get down to business because Madonna wasn't just there for no reason. She noticed how cold her sister Ariana had become and said so with a heavy sigh. The sixth princess hoped that Ariana would know why she was here. As it turned out, she was bringing her letters from Chris, who brought her to this floor. Chris was Madonna's half-brother. It's no wonder they occupy such high places in the rankings. As soon as Sister Madonna handed her the letter, she tore it to shreds. It didn't bring her anything good, and it's clear she never read them. The sixth princess was surprised that she had never read his letters, but she responded that it would not affect her brother's reputation in any way. But it's true. Ariana was very sarcastic. Madonna could be understood. This is how she earns her living. It was time to say goodbye. The princess said that she would go her own way, and they would see each other again. Ariana noticed the gift she had left for her. It contained cookies, which she always left in honor of compassion. She suddenly became very curious about what she had done to Chris and Madonna in the future, whether she had killed them. In her opinion, she had definitely killed Chris, but she wasn't so sure about the second one. Yes, she would definitely kill him without any hesitation. There can be no other outcome. Only the death of this scoundrel. Some time passed, and Our Lady Ariana decided to go out into nature to take a break from all this gilding and grandeur. She sat very thoughtfully, as if she was discussing something very important in her head. There was as much going on in her head as there was water in the ocean. She could not understand whether it was true that in the eyes of the Madonna she looked so stupid as to refuse a man like the Marquis. Of course, the only one who will suffer losses in their deal is the Marquis. But this is precisely what makes him very strange. She knew better than anyone that there is no sincere devotion in the world. Everyone around her is lying. At first, they say one thing, but in person it's completely different. But at that moment, she felt something strange. At that moment when he spoke with such a sincere expression on his face that he showed her a different future. If he is telling the truth, then she should think about how she could become empress. What motivated her so much? Someone with a familiar voice called out to our heroine again, and she was very surprised. It was the Marquis. He wondered why his princess was sitting with such a thoughtful face, but she hinted that it was his fault for constantly thinking about something. He is only glad that she thinks about him so often. He is simply beaming from it, but the heroine is unhappy with his behavior. She asked what had drawn our Marquis here. He knew in advance that she would have another event with her family. Ariana asked him what he had to do with it, and he really wanted to take her there, but she refused in every way. He reminded her that his carriage was much faster, and he had also prepared delicious cookies. The Marquis made a pathetic face that he would have to go alone with a good carriage and eat cookies. Then she jumped up from her seat. A moment later, she beamed and immediately agreed to a portion of delicious cookies. Marquis Joseph offered to take her home. He, like a gentleman, extended his hand to her to help, and she said that she was going because she might be late. But the Marquis understood everything. The carriage drove quickly along the sunny lanes. The streets were quite lively and noisy. It's no coincidence that this is the capital. Meanwhile, in the carriage, over the past 10 years, she had realized that no amount of pride could satisfy hunger. She happily ate the Marquis's sweet pastry, and he added that he was very glad that she liked the treat. But he was upset that his proposal did not please her, just like the cookies, and he added that, having become a knight, she would easily become empress. She laughed at him because he was so confident in his words. But her answer was always obvious, she says. The brother said with disappointment that his interlocutor would, of course, refuse him, but she confirmed it. He began to remind her again about the trust that he thought she didn't have. But that wasn't the point at all. Previously, she always wanted to achieve many things and had reasons to envy others. But only one thing changed her whole life. This, however, was that everything disappeared in one moment. There were no more loved ones who could hug me to their chest in difficult times. Everything slipped out of her hands. The brothers and sisters of the imperial family turned away from her instantly. The emperor does not need those who cannot be used. She has only one desire, to get away from here as far as possible and never return. But when he said that this was complete nonsense, she froze in place. Because there is nothing more stupid than running away from the empire. The Marquis asked her whether a person who had previously belonged to the imperial family could live a normal life. Knowing her family, she must have known that after escaping she would be arrested again for treason. In her head, she was saying that he was saying too much unnecessary and sometimes even irritating things. The carriage stopped. The Marquis assumed that they had probably arrived, so they could get out. She looked depressing. She was in no mood, but he only wished her well. He also added that running away is not a solution to the problem, and she can perceive everything as a warning. She entered the hall of the room where upbeat music was playing, rocking the crowd. Here, in her opinion, there was a chaotic atmosphere, as if everything was changing from good tone to bad. What was strange was that there were dirty dishes on the tables that had been used for dessert. And then our Cid appeared. It turns out he was impatiently awaiting the arrival of the sleeping princess, who was late again. Their appearance is so obvious to the heroine that she is already tired of it, and the prince only says that no one was waiting for her and everyone ate. Nella, as always, was muttering into her fan, but now it was possible to make out something. She was, of course, trying to laugh at her. But Ariana was much smarter and didn't pay attention, but on the contrary, asked to sit at one lady's table, which enraged Arnella. She, holding a fan, considered that it was too vulgar to walk with someone who was not considered a knight or a husband. She was hinting at the Marquis. Nella continued to say something, but it was no longer so important. Ariana was immersed in the incredible aroma of tea, but suddenly the cup started to shine. Nothing was clear. Something had been mixed in there. Ariana also noticed this strange glow. She just saw it. She seemed to feel this power. Someone told Nella to ignore her and drink some calming tea. But suddenly there was a snap of fingers. Ariana was planning something very bad with her power. Incredibly, Nella's cup suddenly burst into pieces, and she froze in place with a terrifying grimace, as if a gun had been pointed at her. Everyone immediately started to fuss about this. Nella was only interested in the new dress she bought, and Ariana realized that she had received the slightest part of her power. Sid immediately ran to her and slammed his hands on the table, as he realized that her power could return. He was very angry with her, because he had previously warned her to be more careful, and now she used force against her sister. She was getting tired of his presence here, as he chatted and talked too much. Every word the heroine said infuriated Sid, but she continued that even her brother couldn't buy his sister a dress with the confiscated budget. The beauty raised her hand and said that in the middle of the third mansion, he was the one who had the most power. But he dumped all the problems on her. He stated that he knew her ability was returning a little, but suddenly someone called him. It was the Marquis who joked with Sid that green tea did not work and did not help the prince. Sid asked the outsider not to interfere in family affairs and offered to keep an eye on the restaurant. The Marquis felt that he could tell him the same thing. After all, it's his restaurant, and he has the right to interfere in the conversation. And on top of that, he has to pay the rent if he wants to continue chatting. And he decided to apologize to the injured princess. After all, it was his fault that he kept fragile cups here. The Marquis is responsible for the damage they suffered because of his dishes, which is precisely why he took out a certain bottle. It was a bottle of dragon tears, which would not leave a trace on the beauty's skin, and there would be no scar. Everything around Nella was shining. She was very embarrassed, because the Marquis was too charming. She was still blushing and could not come to her senses from his clear gaze. But the Marquis himself only wanted to help her. Sid was on the verge of snapping at Joseph Marquis for acting like a knight when he wasn't one yet. Out of anger, he did not dare to pay for the showdown and decided to run out of the restaurant, calling Nella, who had not yet come to her senses. Joseph offered to escort her to Her Highness Ariana, as it was time to leave, and she agreed to the offer. While they were walking towards the exit, the girl covered them with her gaze, and it was clear that she wanted to say something, but couldn't. But as it turned out, she was at dinner, and then she was able to recognize the Marquis. What could this mean? Ariana and the Marquis rode in a carriage past noisy streets. For the first time, our heroine praised her rich brother. Everyone was discussing something. Overall, everything looked sunny and colorful. He asked her to contact him if something suddenly happened. He would solve all the problems for her. She remained silent. But even so, she was not going to change her decision, which upset the future knight just a little. She says that even if she agrees to make him a knight, she is an ordinary laughingstock, and he himself should know what friends of laughingstocks do. But he did not deny it. He put his hand on his heart, saying that he would never regret his decision. "Damn it, he still hasn't given up, no matter how much I warned him. What else should I do?" Ariana said, entering the room. But suddenly someone in front called out to her. But who could have come to the heroine at such a time? "Wow, it's that girl from the Marquis' dinner and restaurant. Her name was Alana, the 16th princess. But what does she need here?" When she saw the heroine, she became very nervous, rubbing her hands, and said that she wanted to talk about something. She was keenly interested in whether Our Lady had taken the Marquis as her knight. Ariana couldn't even imagine how this girl could come up with this idea. But when she remembered, she realized that it was easy to guess. After her sister's words, Alana beamed. It turned out that there had been a misunderstanding on her part, which made her happier. So, Sister Ariana has nothing to do with the Marquis. The beauty confirmed, and they had nothing at all. She knew from the start that the Marquis would never be worthy of such a beautiful sister. But she was able to gain courage thanks to Ariana. Ariana was not delighted with all these words. She tried to stop Alana, but she had almost disappeared from joy and wished her a pleasant rest. After the conversation, it was too unclear whether that girl had really come to ask about this. And it didn't matter anymore, Ariana said. She wanted to rest, since tomorrow she needed to visit Charles, her late brother. The day came and our heroine, dressed in black, reluctantly walked to her brother's tombstone to honor him. During the time she had not visited the graves, everything had been washed away by the rain, and she could not believe that this had not been organized in any way. It wasn't that she felt any pity for him, it was just that something was bothering her. She wanted to keep an eye on the tombstone. She had never visited her mother's grave and was unlikely to do so. In reality, she simply can't be so sentimental anymore. It's too difficult for her. Suddenly, a voice was heard behind her, clearly calling Ariana, but who had frightened her so much? Incredibly, Chris himself came to visit someone. Our heroine's sworn enemy caught her eye. She was irritated by his appearance, since she couldn't stand his impudent face that came here, Ariana said. But Chris was only glad to see her. The heroine constantly asked him why he came here. Why no one else but you? He answered that he simply decided to honor the memory. She was angry with him because he dared to come here when he himself had killed him. Ariana kept thinking that he had never come here before, so why did he want to come here? It's not that his sister was angry with him. She wanted to take his head for daring to laugh not only at her, but also at the deceased. Suddenly, he stopped her and asked why she hadn't read a single letter from him. She didn't turn to him with good intentions. She didn't even think about reading the letters of the one who killed her brother, the one who took away literally everything she had. Princess Ariana was truly angry, as she was tired of seeing this hypocrite who puts on masks in front of the dead. Chris stood up and laughed a little at her words, as he wanted to make her understand. Or rather, according to him, she didn't understand anything. He said that he was not guilty of Charles's death. At that moment, everything froze. The wind died down. The grass did not sway in the wind. The one she blamed says that he was not involved in anything bad. She finally stopped yelling at him, but this meeting gave her grounds for more questions about what this bastard was talking about. He pulled out some paper from his pocket. Could these really be similar letters that he had sent her earlier? As it turned out, he always tried to bring her letters through Madonna, but Ariana tore them up as soon as she received them. What he said shocked her. Her heart stopped beating for a second. That letter in his hand and the other letters that were torn, they were all from Charles addressed to Ariana. It took her only a second to snatch the letter from Chris's hands, which happened with a loud bang. Her hands were shaking under the pressure of her soul. She did not understand why this impudent man was doing this, for what purpose, whether he was lying, or whether this was a genuine letter from Charles. Chris said that this is his last letter and that it will be necessary to read it. This time he seriously asked her to read the letter as seriously as possible, so that she could grasp all of her brother's words. She held the letter in her hands with trepidation, which was addressed to his little sister Ariana, Charles's little sister. He wrote how grateful he was to her for her efforts, for the fact that they could live in the imperial palace, for the fact that she diligently did everything for them. He, like no one else, knew that her talent and skills were unsurpassed. While she was studying and living in conditions of constant competition from more promising heirs, Charles secretly always kept an eye on the younger one. As much as he wanted to run up to her, he looked at her and admired her so as not to interfere. But someday he won't get away with it. In the castle, he was easy prey for the others. He was not allowed anywhere, since he was not the successor. His elders always grabbed him by the collar and shouted at him, but he couldn't get close to his sister because they wouldn't let him. It was then that he met Chris, who turned out to be a good friend who protected him from attacks. He was the only one who considered his problems to be something serious, and they always discussed how to maintain Ariana's position. But he couldn't do anything for her, since he played the role of ballast. Even if Chris was against it, Charles still decided to distance himself from her. He wasn't so harsh that he could easily make his sister go away from him for a long time, but in other ways he only caused her more pain and made her feel even more than just lonely. This was his last proposal. He asked her to never forget her again, but also thanked her for trying for him and his mother. He wanted to take care of her from behind the shadow for her own good. After these words, she tore the letter into tiny pieces without any regret. She understood that it was his handwriting, her brother's handwriting. All his habits were noticed in the notes. No one will be able to explain to Ariana any more why he did this to her, what she needed to do, what exactly Charles would have wanted when he hugged her so tightly. She was gloomier than ever. An incredible anger took hold of her, and she asked who had killed her brother, who had dared to interfere in her life. Chris said that her anger would be useless, except to scream and rage, asking who killed him. He came closer, saying that before she went and looked for the culprit, she should gather her strength to fight back, and the search was the next step. But she still had a couple of questions. It was no coincidence that she approached Chris with such a sad face. She could not understand why he had said a few words on the day of the trial. But as it turned out, he was on Charles's side. He then spoke with a certain hatred, as if for all her efforts, her wings had been torn off. The prince scratched his head and said that it was a reason to motivate her, so that she would have a reason to move on and take revenge on everyone around her. Afterwards, he realized that this method had not worked and reminded Charles, who was lying nearby, of this. But he did not respond. And Chris added that he would help look for this bastard who killed Ariana's brother. Their meeting raised even more questions in her head. She couldn't believe that all these years he treated her so badly just for this reason. For all these years, she was angry at the one who killed her brother, but she considered Chris to be the killer. And here, he is not guilty at all. Ariana was furious that she was angry and hated a man who was not at all guilty. So who was this criminal? Who was the winner when he took her out of the game for the throne? It was definitely someone from the family. Who the hell was he? Who killed his brother? Who dared to stab him in the back? The furious Ariana asked herself. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't see anything in front of her. There were too many suspects. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the Marquis appeared, who had been shouting at the lady for a long time, but she was only hovering in her thoughts. She was very surprised that he appeared here and hesitantly said his name. He took her hand firmly, saying that he would be very glad that he was the reason for her torture. But no. The heroine clenched her fist so hard that she created a giant scar on her hand, which made the Marquis ask her not to hurt herself like that again. Ariana asked him if he was tired of constantly coming to a girl who wanted nothing to do with him. He immediately thought that she would not like the answer, since he would be more happy to wait for her agreement. These words struck her. He gives her an oath that he does not need any girl, that only one lady is his lady of the heart, and this is our heroine. But she doesn't know if she can trust him. He's suspicious, stubborn, doesn't look at anyone but her, and he also says that he will definitely make her empress. If she accepts him as a knight today, he declares that he will be very useful to her highness. He held her hand even tighter, and said that he would do everything for her. What would she say? And she thought, if this is the only chance, then. And she finally agreed. She was able to master it. From this moment on, Brother Marquis could become a knight. After these words, she grabbed the scoundrel by the collar, saying in her head that he was caught. For her, it was an opportunity given by God or the hand of the devil. But she could no longer give up everything. She said with a face full of madness that she would become her knight. She would use him and finish her revenge. But he should prepare for shame. The path from the shame of the imperial family to the empress of the empire will be difficult, so to speak. It was too late to back down. Now he was chosen by his mistress, and he had nowhere to run from her. He just started laughing out loud at this, as if he had lost his mind from her words. Anyway, he knelt before her and said that his mistress was completely right. After these words, the Marquis kissed the beauty's wound with great fervor. He said that he would give her everything he had, but she had to crush everyone and climb to the top. Brother Marquis is infinitely glad that he will be able to serve Her Highness Ariana. From now on, he should stop being so impudent. She told him these conditions and pulled her hand away. And she warned that this was the last warning. After another such mistake, she would no longer be with him. Now all she had to do was take the knight's oath so that everything would be official and not just words.